I want to talk about something I heard in the Hayden Panettiere interview with Shetty. And I want to be honest with you. I wasn't expecting to feel the way I felt during that interview because I didn't go in looking for a celebrity story. I went in and I heard something I hear in my counseling office all the time, over and over and over again. I heard what happens when a child is never given the chance to just be a child. She said something early in that interview that stopped me cold. She said, I trusted them more than I ever trusted myself. I wasn't raised to trust myself. And I thought, this is the whole thing right here of this interview. This is the thread that runs through her life, every single part of her story, the pattern, the lack of self-trust that she was never taught. And if you've ever said or thought that about yourself, I want you to stay with me during this video. Hayden stated in the interview that she started working at 8 months old. 8 months, that's a baby. She didn't choose this fame life, this celebrity life. She was placed in it before she even had language to understand what was happening, what she was doing. And as she got older, she described this identity crisis that she had around 12 years old, where she was standing in her room asking herself, who am I without this fame in this life? She could play every character beautifully. She could find every part of herself in every role. But she said, I don't know who I was without it. And I need you to hear what that actually is. This is not a celebrity problem. This is what happens when a child's sense of self gets built around performance instead of personhood. When they are praised for what they do, not for who they are. And I want you to see here for a second, because I think a lot of people hear that and they just sit over there and they nod, but they don't fully feel what that means. So let me make it real for you. Being praised for what you do, for the performance part of you and not who you are, it sounds like you are so smart, but it never sounds like, how are you feeling? It sounds like, I'm so proud of your grades, but it never sounds like, I am proud of you just for being you. It sounds like you were so good today, and you learn quickly when the praise sounds like this, what happens on the days when you're not that person, when you're not always good, you're not bringing home the good grades, when you're not on your A game. It sounds like affection that shows up after a performance, after you win, after you succeed, after you made someone else proud. And slowly, without anyone saying it out loud, you get the message. Your body gets the message. It gets ingrained in your mind and your soul that my value is in what I produce, that my lovability is conditional based on my performance and what I produce. And if I stop performing, then I stop being worth something. That is the messages that kids receive when it's performance-based love. And when love feels like that, like it has to be earned, like it's based on how good you are, then you don't just work hard. You become exhausted in every way that has nothing to do with your schedule. You become someone who cannot rest without feeling guilt. You become someone who over-explains, who over-delivers, who over-apologizes, someone who quickly panics when there's nothing left to offer. Because deep down, you believe that without something to give, there's no reason for anyone to stay in your life. You were wired to believe that starting as a child. That is the way children analyze and interpret things that are praised upon them for things that they do instead of who they are. And this is not a personality trait. That is a wound, and it starts early, a lot earlier than most people realize. And listen, you don't have to have grown up on a movie set for this to be your story. Some of you earned love by being the good one, being the responsible one, being the one who never caused any problems, being the one who made everyone else comfortable, being the one who tried to regulate everyone else's feelings. That's the same wound, just a different stage. It's just not so public and out there. And at 19, Hayden finally got up the courage to sit her mom down. And she didn't go in angry. She went in hopeful in that moment. She went in and she said to her mom, I just want you to be my mom. I don't want this business relationship where you're my boss. I just want a mother. And this was at 19 years old. So her mother had been her momager, as Hayden stated, since 8 months old. So she just wanted a mother-daughter relationship at 19 and went in to talk to her mom and was hopeful. And her mom looked at her in the face and she said 3 words to Hayden. She said, "You owe me." And then she walked out. I want you to sit with that for a minute. I want you to think about that for a moment. That this is the clearest picture of what earned love looks like. The message that Hayden received her whole life was confirmed right there at 19 years old in that sentence and that moment with her mom. It was confirmed to her that love is a transaction. And when the transaction has stopped, so did the relationship. She said even after that, even knowing that, she spent years desperately seeking her mother's approval. After every single take on set, she didn't look at the directors for confirmation, for a nod. She looked at her mom because her mom's face was a measuring stick of her life. And that is attachment. That's not weakness. That is attachment. That is a nervous system that learned early that her mother's approval means that I'm safe. And on learning that is one of the hardest things a person can do. Hayden went on in the interview to talk about being bullied as a child by her classmates, by her teachers. And she said something that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. She said she kept the mean notes that she was handed. She kept them in a binder under her bed, not because she was dwelling on it, but because she was studying those notes. She was trying to understand what they saw in her so she could change it. And she desperately wanted to change it so that they would accept her. She said that during those early childhood moments that started the habit of her changing who she was to make others happy. Can you see how early that started in her life? She said this was around her kindergarten, first grade years of her life. That's around 5, 6 years old. And she wasn't being dramatic. She wasn't being weak in those moments. She was a child trying to survive a social environment that kept rejecting her over and over and over by her peers and by authority, her teachers, her parents. All of them are failing her left and right. She found the only tool available to her, which was to become who they needed her to be in order to survive, in order to be accepted. And that strategy works just long enough to become a pattern. And here's why that's so dangerous. It's so dangerous because it worked. That's the part nobody talks about. Changing yourself to make people comfortable, shrinking yourself to avoid conflict, performing the version of you that gets the best reaction. It works. It worked for Hayden because people stayed, people smiled, the room felt safer to her, and your nervous system in those moments, it filed that away. It filed it away in her nervous system. That this right here, changing who we are to meet other people's needs, that is how we survive. So what do we do to survive? We keep doing it. That is now programmed in her. That is how it gets programmed in us because survival is necessary. And as you get older, none of the survival wiring just disappears because you're older and you're an adult. It just transforms. So things like the classroom, it becomes your office. The teacher, it becomes your boss. The mean girls, they become the friends that you desperately are trying not to lose. The parent, who you need it to be perfect, becomes the partner who you're walking on eggshells around. And you don't even notice it happening. You don't even notice the patterns repeating just in different ways because it doesn't feel like a pattern to you. It just feels like you. It just feels like life. This is just life to you. It feels like being easygoing, being flexible, being the bigger person, being low maintenance. But underneath all of that, you're still the kid with the notes under the bed, still studying what's wrong with you, still convinced that if you could just figure out the right version of yourself to show up as, then people would finally stop pleading, that people would finally stop pulling away, that people would finally accept you, that people would finally just stay. And I need you to hear this. The problem was never the version of you that you showed up as. The problem was that you were in rooms with people who required you to change in order to be accepted. And you deserve to be in better rooms than that. And you still deserve to be in better rooms than that because you are enough and you are worthy just as you are. And here's something that Hayden also described that a lot of people glossed over, that she became her mother's confidant, her assistant, her emotional support, her mother's therapist, everything but her mother's child. She became that. And she said, I was the only person there. So I became everything but her daughter. And that right there, that is parentification. And if you grew up being the emotional caretaker in your home, being the one who managed the mood in the room, being the one who made sure everybody was okay, being that one who could never just fall apart because someone needed you to hold it together, I need you to know that being that person, being that child, it leaves a huge mark on you. It wires you to believe that your worth lives in being useful. That rest for you means that you are lazy. That you needing something is a burden. That being taken care of is something that other people get, not you. That is the mark that parentification leaves on you. And you carry that into every single relationship that you enter until the point where you learn to put it down, to let it go, until you do the work to change that program. Until that happens, you are carrying that into every relationship you enter. And then Hayden went on to read something from a journal in the interview live on the podcast for the first time. And what she said during that reading was, I realized I was more afraid of being alone than being abused. I need you to hear that from a clinical standpoint. That is not weakness. That is not stupidity. That is what happens when your attachment system has been wired to associate love with chaos. When you grew up in an environment where love was inconsistent or conditional. Her environment, love was conditional on her performance. So she was wired to believe that it was better to have abuse in her life than to be alone. That type of wiring also comes when pain is attached to it. When your nervous system doesn't learn to seek safe love, it learns to seek familiar love. She learned that love was painful. And familiar can feel a lot like chaos. She also made a connection in that interview that I think gets missed. She said the abuse from her ex mirrored the abuse from her mother. She said that exact wording, and she said it out loud on the podcast for the first time. And I want to slow all the way down here because this is not just an observation about Hayden's life. This is one of the most important things I will ever say on this platform. Your childhood wired you, period. Full stop. It wired you, and it didn't metaphorically. It literally, your childhood literally wired you. The experiences you had as a child, the way love was given or withheld, the way conflict was handled or avoided, the way your emotions were welcomed or shut down, the way you were seen or weren't seen, all of that became the blueprints of who you are today. It is. It's the template your nervous system uses to answer one question. What does love feel like? What does safe feel like? What does normal feel like? And here's the part that is so hard to accept. You didn't choose that blueprint. You didn't choose that blueprint as a child. You were a child. You had no say at all. You just absorbed it. And then you grew. And you took that blueprint into every relationship you entered, into every friendship you entered, into every partnership you entered, into every job you entered, into every dynamic you had. And you didn't even know you were doing it because it was just ingrained and programmed and wired into you. Because that didn't feel like a pattern to you. It just felt like life to you. It felt like this is just who I attract. This is just what always happens to me. This is just how love goes. But no, this is your wiring looking for what it already knows. This is attachment theory in real life, not in a textbook, not in a therapy office, and Hayden's relationships, and in your relationships, and my relationships. And when your earliest experiences of love come with chaos, your nervous system learned chaos is familiar, chaos is home, chaos is safe. And so when you meet someone who's calm and stable and consistent, something in you goes, this is not right. This feels off. This feels boring. I don't know if I can trust this. But when you meet someone who gives you that familiar push, pull, chaotic, hot, cold, inconsistent moments of intensity followed by distance, something in you and those in that type of environment goes, this right here, this unhealthy stuff, but you don't say it's unhealthy. This feels like love, even when it's hurting you, because your nervous system isn't looking for what's good. It's not looking for what's healthy. It's looking for what's known because it knows how to survive that and knows how to get through that. And I need you to hear something important. This does not mean that your parents were monsters. It doesn't mean that. This does not mean the people who raised you didn't love you. Some of them, they loved you with everything that they had. Some of them genuinely did the best that they could, and it still wired you. So both things that can be true. Their intention doesn't erase the impact that your childhood had on you. You can love someone and still acknowledge what their limitations cost you. You can still love your parents and still acknowledge what their limitations in parenthood and caretaking cost you. You can be grateful for them and still grieve what you didn't have or what you needed to get and receive. You can honor your parents and still say, the way I was raised shaped me in ways that I'm still unraveling. And that right there, that's not betrayal. That's just honesty. That is the beginning of healing. That is you admitting that you were wired. Because here's what Hayden did in that moment. She didn't just sit and say, my ex was abusive. She said that I see the connection between my ex and my mother. I see the pattern between my ex and my mother. I can see that I have been here before. And that right there, that moment for Hayden, that was awareness. That moment of seeing the blueprint for what it is. That is the hardest and most courageous things that a human being can do. Because most people, they never even get there. Most people stay in the pattern their whole entire lives. Not because they're broken, but because no one ever handed them a mirror and said to them, look at what you learned to call love. And ask yourself, is that what you actually want for yourself for the rest of your life? Or is this just what you know? This last line that she said kept coming back to me. She said it more than once. She said, I wasn't raised to trust myself, not as a person, only as an actress. Her instincts were trusted on set. Her talent was trusted. But as a human being making decisions about her own life, her own body, her own safety, she was taught to follow the people around her and not trust herself. And so when someone gave her pills to calm her nerves before a red carpet, what did she do? She didn't question it. She took them. Not because she was reckless, but because she had been taught to trust the people in authority over her own gut. And when someone she trusted led her to a room on a boat with an older man, she walked in, she was shocked because she had no framework for questioning the people who were supposed to protect her. And this right here is what happens when a child is taught, whether by words or by experience, that their instincts can't be trusted. They become an adult who second guesses everything they feel, who apologizes for their own perception, who lets things go on far for way too long because they keep asking themselves, am I sure about this? Am I overreacting? Am I wrong? And building self-trust after that is not just a mind shift change. It's work. It's beautiful work. It's deep. It's slow. It's scarce. It's powerful work. And Hayden went on to talk about postpartum depression, about not connecting with her daughter the way she knew she should, about feeling like something was terribly wrong, about going to a facility for alcoholism where no one ever mentioned postpartum depression. She felt in those moments unfixable, and she thought, maybe this is just who I am. And then later, when she had to make the decision about her daughter's living situation, she said something that broke my heart wide open. She said, I grieve not being the mother I thought I was going to be. And I want to pause there just for a second, because Hayden grieved two things in this story. Really three, because she did grieve her brother who passed away as well. But two big pivotal things that she grieved and talked about a lot in this story. And a lot of people probably only caught one of those two things I'm referencing. The first grief is the one that's easier to see. She grieved the mother she never had, the relationship that should have been there, the woman who should have just said, Hayden, I see you, I hear you, and you matter to me beyond anything else in this world, beyond what you produce. But instead, the mother came and said to her, you owe me, and then walked out. And I want you to sit with that for a second, because so many of you have been in that room. Maybe not literally, maybe not faced with this exact situation, but you know what it feels like to finally get up the courage, to finally say the words, to go to someone who hurt you and to say to them, this affected me. This changed me. And I need you to understand what this did to me. And you go into that conversation hoping. You go in vulnerable, probably scared. And you're not there. You don't go in to fight. But you're there because some part of you believes that if they could just see it the way you see it, if they could just understand what it cost you, how it affected you, how much it hurt you, how much pain it caused you, then maybe you could finally let go. Then maybe you can finally heal. And what happens is that sometimes they say that that's not what I remembered, or that you're being too sensitive, or they look at you blankly in the eye like you're describing something that happened to a stranger, or they flip it entirely and suddenly you're the one who's apologizing. And then you end up leaving that conversation feeling worse than you walked in, feeling more confused, feeling more alone, feeling more convinced that maybe you really are the crazy one, but you're not crazy. But I do need to tell you something about that hope you walked in that room to have that conversation with. Waiting for someone to validate your pain is like handing them the keys to your healing. You are saying, by doing this, that I cannot move forward until you tell me that I am allowed to feel the way that I feel. That I cannot heal until you co-sign my experience. That my peace is contingent on your emotional maturity. And that right there is one of the most dangerous places that you can live. Because here's a truth that nobody talks about, that nobody says out loud. Some people will never, ever be capable of giving you what you're asking for. And that's not because it didn't happen. That's not because your pain isn't real. It's because looking at what they did would require them to look at who they are as a person. And some people are not there yet. Some people maybe never will ever get there. And Brene Brown, she talks about this, that you cannot share your vulnerability with just anyone, that you have to really earn the right to hear someone's story. And some people in your life have not earned that right. They have shown you over and over and over again that they cannot hold your pain with care. And yet you keep going back. We keep trying to explain it differently. We keep hoping that this time something will just click with them, because we are taught that love means being understood. And when the person who is supposed to love us most is the same person who keeps refusing to understand us, to acknowledge the pain they caused, we don't know how to stop trying. So I want to say this to you directly. Stop waiting. Not because your pain doesn't deserve to be witnessed, because it does. It really, truly does. But it's because your healing cannot live in someone else's hands. You have to be able to look at your own story, and you have to say to yourself, to validate yourself and say that this happened, that it mattered, that it changed me, that it impacted me, that it affected me. And I do not need anyone else to confirm that for it to be true. It is true. My body knows it. My mind knows it. It's true. You do not need evidence. You do not need a witness. You do not need other people or another person to stand up and say, yes, I did that and I'm sorry. Even if that moment never comes, you are still allowed to heal. You are still allowed to grieve. You are still allowed to let go. You are still allowed to move on. And your story is valid. What happened to you is valid. Even if the person who wrote part of that story with you will never be able to own their chapter. And then in Hayden's podcast in the story, there was a second grief, the quieter one, the one that Hayden mentioned almost in passing. But I think it deserves its own kind of conversation entirely. She said that I grieve not being the mother I thought I was going to be. And I felt that one so deep in my chest. The grief of the version of yourself that never got to exist. The mother that you planned to be. The parent who had it together, who was always present, who wasn't drowning, who didn't need to heal herself while trying to raise someone else. Society, especially for women, especially for mothers, has handed us this image that you will feel it instantly, that it just comes just like that. That you will be overwhelmed with love, and that's it, nothing else. Not overwhelmed with life, just with love. That you will be tired, yes, but you will be grateful. That you will figure it out. That you will hold it all together all the time with a smile on your face and with gratitude in your heart. And that you will make it look flawless and beautiful and almost like it's easy peasy. And when the reality doesn't match that image, we don't grieve it. We shame ourselves for it. I have shamed myself so much for this. We think something is wrong with us. We think, why can't I just be grateful? Why can't I just be content? Why does it feel so hard? What kind of mother feels this way? And that guilt, it eats you alive. The weight of that gap between who you thought you would be and who you actually are in the hardest moments are enormous. And it's so lonely because no one else talks about it. Because admitting it feels like you're failing. I have felt like such a failure as a mom repeatedly, on repeat, over and over and over. Because we have been told in 100 different ways that a good mother doesn't feel like this. But here's what I want you to know. Grieving the mother that you thought you would be does not make you a bad mother. It makes you a human being who had expectations, who had a vision, who is living inside the gap between the vision and the reality of life, and is brave enough to feel it instead of numb it. Hayden, she felt it, and she's still there. She's still showing up. She's still fighting for that relationship with her daughter. She's still choosing connection over and over and over again. Hayden is not a failure. That is not a failure. This is love doing its best work. She is so filled with love for her daughter, and I see it in her eyes and the way she talks and the way she speaks. It's the most imperfect circumstances. And if you have ever grieved the parent you thought you would be, or the child you thought you would have, or the family that you thought you were building, that grief is real and it belongs to you and it deserves to be honored, not rushed, not spiritually bypassed, not met with, well, at least, or look how far you've come, just honored. And before I close, I want to speak directly to Hayden for a moment, because I watched that interview. I watched her interview and I watched her hold back the tears. I watched her search for words for things that she has never said out loud before. I watched someone who is very clearly still in the middle of it, in the middle of the healing, in the middle of the processing, who's still doing the work, who's still learning how to come back to herself, how to build that self-trust, how to be secure within herself. And I just want to say, Hayden, I see you, not the actress, not the headlines, not the version of you that the world decided that it knew, that it casted judgment on. I see you. I see the little girl who just wanted her mom to be her mom. I see the teenager who was handed things that she never should have been handed. I see the woman who kept getting back up over and over and over again, even when no one was watching, even when no one was cheering. You were failed by people who were supposed to protect you, by people who were supposed to show you how loved and worthy and extraordinary you are. And instead of doing that, they handed you a role and they expected you to perform it. And the fact that you are still here and that you are still choosing awareness over bitterness and that you're still doing the deep, hard work of understanding your own story, of understanding you, that you're still building self-trust one moment at a time, that's not small. That is everything. You are not what happened to you. You are not the addiction. You are not the abuse. You are not the headlines. You are a woman who walked through fire and came out the other side still fighting for herself. And I am so proud of you for the courage that it took to write that book, for the courage that it took to sit down in that interview with Jay Shetty, for the courage that it took to read from that journal entry that you wrote on live TV for the first time out loud, and for the courage that it took to let people in, to be vulnerable. You are so beautiful. You are so strong. You are a survivor. And your healing is proof that it is possible to heal, that it is possible for all of us to heal, no matter how deep the wound is, no matter how long you've been carrying it, that it is possible. You are an amazing person, Hayden. And I am so blessed to be able to hear that interview that you conducted. And I cannot wait to read your book. And healing is such a beautiful and powerful thing. So much so that in the end of the interview, Hayden finished after reading that journal entry. She said, "In this moment, I feel more trust in myself than I have in years. I got a little bit of me back just now." And that right there, that's it. That's the whole thing right there. Self-trust is not a destination that you arrive at. It's a moment, and then another moment, and then another moment. Healing is the same. It's not a destination you arrive at. It is a moment, and then another moment, and then another moment. It's choosing to believe in yourself. Healing, self-trust, it's choosing to believe in yourself over and over and over again, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it means disappointing people, even when no one else validates what you know to be true. Hayden's story is not a celebrity story. It's a human story. It's about a little girl who was placed into a life she didn't choose, who spent decades trying to earn love that should have just been given to her freely, who survived things that would have broken most people, and who is still here, who's still fighting to get back to herself. And if any part of her story feels like yours today, that's not a coincidence. And you deserve the same chance that she is giving herself to heal. Not because someone finally validated your pain, but because you finally decided that you are worth it. So thank you for watching. And if this resonated with you, share it with somebody who needs to hear it. And I'll catch you on the next video. Like and subscribe. Thank you.